Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today, our special guest is Drew DeVore. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rocco. How are you?
I am excellent. I have coffee. We're going to talk about Linux. What could be better, brother?
Nothing.
Exactly. All right. Most people will know you from being an on-air personality, podcaster, creator on Jupiter Broadcasting. You co-host shows like Linux News Headlines. You've been a part of the Linux Action News and Linux Unplugged. You're an audio editing engineer for Jupiter Broadcasting, and people know that you edit the audio for a lot of the podcasts there. That is what you're noted for. If somebody met you that you didn't know and they didn't know you, who would you say Drew DeVore is personally?
Personally, that is a big question. I have kind of been around and done a lot in my time. And as a person, I'm kind of a weird guy. Like I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not shameful about it. I totally own it. But I feel like I'm a pretty good person to know. And if you had to boil it down to one word, it's just geek. I'm an all-around geek.
I love it. Absolutely fabulous. So your bio says that you have worked in theater, live music, and broadcast for 15 years. So how did you get started in that?
I really started in middle school. Kind of got the bug for live entertainment. And I did some plays and things like that in middle and high school. And then later on in high school, I started doing the tech theater program. And I absolutely fell in love with the backstage stuff. So I actually convinced the headmaster to let me take that twice instead of getting a second PE credit. So
Nice.
yeah, like that was kind of my thing. And I went off to college and I ended up getting a theater degree, mostly focused on backstage. Wasn't ever much of an actor or anything like that, though I did do some voiceover classes, which turns out helped me a lot. But
In the end, it does.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just took me, a few years to get to where that aspect really was helping me out. But hey, I'm here now.
That's it.
Yeah, does well. But I graduated with a degree in theater, and from there, I had been interning at this little theater in Asheville, North Carolina, that the technical director asked me, "So when are you graduating and coming to work for me full time?" And so I did that. I went and worked at Diana Wortham for about 5 years, I think. And started doing freelance stuff and started doing more music and ended up over in Cherokee, North Carolina as the head of audio for their 3,000 seat venue.
Wow.
And yeah, that was kind of the capstone of my live audio engineering days. And it was a lot of fun. I really loved it. And then I took a little bit of a break and moved to Savannah with my then girlfriend, now wife, and took a job doing support for computers, small, medium businesses, and building networks and just generally doing the managed service provider thing. Did that for about 5 years and then happened to land the job with Jupiter Broadcasting. And yeah, that's where I've been for the past year, doing this.
So you go from, live shows and doing audio for that. How do you said you made the jump to do support. So how do you make that jump? Were you involved with this in school or what?
No. When I reached out to the company that I ended up working for down here, um, basically I said, "Hey, I've been doing this stuff, on my own. I don't have like a CS degree. I don't even really have any direct experience except for the fact that this is my other passion is
Right.
computing." And they saw that passion and I guess figured I was a smart enough guy to do what they needed me to do and hired me. And
I think that's awesome that companies do that. That it's not all about the resume, it's not all about the certificates, but it's about who you are and
right.
how much passion you have. So, yeah, definitely awesome. Now, your Linux News headlines bio says that you rescue rabbits. So, what is that all about?
So my wife decided that she wanted a rabbit, and we got a rabbit, and then we got another rabbit to be that rabbit's friend. And then um, when we moved down to Savannah and started working with the vet that we have here, who's an exotic animal vet, which, they're the third most popular pet in the world, but they're still classified as exotics. Um, and she basically said, "You guys actually know what you're doing." And then she started calling us with these rabbits that needed homes.
Oh my.
And yeah, and so we started taking them in, and the number kind of grew and grew. And we did have some, tragedies where some rabbits weren't quite healthy and didn't live very long, or, lived for 5 years and then had an unfortunate incident. Like we had one that had a blood clot that ended up, taking her down. But we're up to 8 rabbits in the house right now. And we've kind of put a hold on rescuing any more for the time being. Um, the last one, actually, I had to fly out to Chicago to pick it up. We've started doing it, rescuing rabbits from Las Vegas, even. So,
Oh my.
yeah, they're coming from all over, and they're one of the most surrendered pets in the country. A lot of people will get them as like Easter gifts for their kids, and then they realize, oh wait, these are a lot of maintenance. Like
Yep.
it's more work than a dog by a lot, and they live 10 years on average. So it's not a set it and forget it pet.
Right.
And yeah, so they end up getting surrendered a lot and end up with people like me.
That's good work, man. Good work.
Yeah.
So your day job right now is working for Linux Academy, which was recently acquired by Cloud Guru, and more specifically for Jupiter Broadcasting. You do all of the editing for not all of the editing, you have other editors, but you do a lot of the editing for podcasts and interviews that are created. And that to me sounds like a dream job. But even in a small experiences of my own in editing audio, I know that there's a lot of work involved and sometimes a lot of headaches involved as well. And you almost need to be a perfectionist in that field. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. It's an awful lot of work and an awful lot of tedium. And it really takes a certain kind of person to want to do it and, in my opinion, to be good at it. There are a lot of people out there who think, oh, I'll just throw this together. No, there's a lot more to it than that. You don't just line things up and export. There's some finesse involved where you actually want to get things sounding good and have a flow going to the episode so that people aren't talking over each other. You don't have distracting noises going on all over the place, and the audio sounds good. That's
Right.
usually a pretty decent thing to have going on. And that's a lot of what I do is cleaning stuff up, lining it up properly, making sure that everything sounds good and that, people aren't just bowling over each other talking, and generally enhancing intelligibility of everything that's going on.
Right, because you're seeing it raw form, and but you have to make it sound good, and I think more importantly, like you said, flow good for the person that's listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, it's if you don't have a good flow going, in my opinion, people are a lot more likely to tune out. It just sounds messy and it sounds, too raw. Where one thing that a lot of people don't really consider, I think, when they're listening to these shows is people are, geodiverse. So you have somebody in California, you have somebody in London, you have somebody in Australia, you have somebody wherever. It takes time for these signals to get from me to you. And there's a little bit of a delay. So it's not always super clean. It's not quite like sitting in the same room with the person raw on tape. So that needs to be fixed. You have to correct that drift, and you have to make it sound like there is no drift. You have to
Right.
make it feel like everybody's sitting in a living room having a chat or in a studio. Really it depends on the type of show as for what kind of feel you go for, whether it's more professional or whether it's more um, I don't know, relaxed, laid back.
Yeah,
Just
coffee
depends.
shop type.
Hmm.
Uh, so for the Linux live, Big Daddy Linux live shows that we do, the streams that we do, we have up to 30 some people sometimes. And like you said, with the signals going back and forth between different areas, there's a delay for a lot of the people, and I find that people will end up talking over each other. It's pretty much impossible to get it out of a setting like that, but in a interview type setting, it's extremely important for people listening.
Yeah.
And I had a recent guest who had mentioned about audio and said, I forget exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect of, you can forgive a video for being not the greatest quality, but you can't forgive audio when
Oh,
it's bad. So,
yeah. Well, I like that. As an audio person, yeah, that's right up my alley.
so editing audio is to me either a job you love or hate. It's not you're not in the middle. You're not doing it just because. You've been doing it for many years, so it has to be something that you love to do. Can you talk about what a typical day in the life of Drew consists of?
Sure. So a lot of times first of all, I'm time shifted to Seattle because that's where the studio is and that's where a lot of the content gets generated. So rather than getting up and working 9 to 5, my time, Eastern time, I will get up and work noon to 8. And so I'll get up and start having my coffee and possibly listen to something that I didn't personally edit. Or if I have something on deck that I've edited but haven't listened back to yet, I'll listen to that and just kind of relax and ease into my day while having a little bit of caffeine and getting my ears kind of tuned for the morning. Yeah, exactly. And then round about 3 o'clock my time, after I've done a little bit of editing or maybe some audio cleanup or just read some articles to kind of get refreshed. It just depends on the day.
Yep.
Um, I'll be doing headlines, and sometimes I'm recording, sometimes I'm just editing. But I've got the period from 2:30 to 3:30, 4 o'clock booked daily just to do headlines and get that out. And then from there, I will move on to whatever the next thing on the calendar is and just start knocking out shows. And that pretty
Nice.
much takes me to the end of the day. I mean,
Yep.
I'll just be sitting there in my digital audio workstation, lining tracks up and adjusting EQs and compression until I'm done for the day. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about your work. We talked about rescuing rabbits. Do you have any hobbies?
Sure. I do enjoy playing video games. Recently, I've been getting back into making some music, uh, although I'm not quite sure that what I'm making right now would qualify as music a lot of the times. Um, I tried instruments as I was growing up, and nothing really quite gelled with me. But lately, I've been getting into modular synthesis via something called VCV Rack. I actually did an extras episode on Jupiter Extras about it with Graham Morrison. And essentially, it's where you take a synthesizer and break it down to its most basic parts. And then you can connect all of those parts individually. And so I've been doing a lot of that. And I end up posting them on my Twitter, not like, oh my God, look at this music I made. It's more, here's what I learned how to do today. And it's probably not something that most people are going to want to listen to, like as music, but I find it interesting. And it's almost like keeping a diary of my progress. I can go back and look at each of the day's tracks and say, oh, wow, this was better than yesterday. Or, hey, I found this really cool way of doing something. And that's been my biggest hobby lately.
Yep. Well, you know, spoken like a true geek. Um, I listened to that episode, and that episode was really deep. But Graham is another geek in of himself, so it was a fantastic episode.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, we've been kicking the can around a little bit, thinking about possibly doing another one, but we haven't quite settled on a topic or a date or anything like that yet. It's just kind of in stasis. We'll see. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So you have a Twitter handle, Drew of Doom. Where did that come from?
That came from a college in joke. I've been a big fan of horror since I was, a wee little teenager, and I made friends in college who were also big horror fans. And one of the jokes was saying something of doom, like, the fork of doom. And so I became the Drew of Doom. And I just kind of kept it. Like, okay. I mean, I've been on Twitter since like 2007, something like that. I'm not going to change my name now. That's it. I'm stuck with it.
That's it. It's
But
not worth changing.
hey, I think it still resonates with me. Like, I don't hate it. So yeah, I'll keep it.
All right. So, you work for companies that are really familiar with Linux, where you probably can talk to anybody there about Linux and they don't look at you like you got three heads. Um, what about your family, your friends, circle of people that you come in contact? Are you able to talk to them about Linux as well?
Some. It's I think that circle is growing recently, and part of it is because, I've got more friends in the tech industry more than anything. Just because that's the way my life has gravitated. But my dad and mom, no, they don't really care. They've tried listening to some of the shows that I do for Jupiter, and it's just way over their heads. They don't understand what I'm talking about. They know, that I've been into Linux for a long time because I started while I was still living in their house. But um, my uncle ran a PC repair business called Mr. PC in Austin, Texas. And it was always a Windows shop, but he did start playing with Ubuntu at a certain point. So he and I could chat a little bit back and forth. And he's really the only family member of mine that has any clue whatsoever what it is. And my friends, I'd say it's, 50-50 just based on the circles I've been running in for the past 10 years or so.
Yep. Well, we're fortunate enough to have such a great community where we are. So, yeah. All right. So we're going to get into Linux and all of those types of things. But let's start at the beginning. Your computer journey. Where did it start? What was the first computer that you used?
That would have been a Commodore 64. And that was my dad's Commodore 64. And I don't remember when he got it. I think I was a little too young to remember him actually, buying it and setting it up for the first time. But I do remember, that blue screen with the white text and, command run to get my games going and everything, so I could play Kung Fu or Zork or whatever. And yeah, I played with that machine a lot in my youth. Um, I really think having that around as I was growing up was a big part of why I ended up, you know, gravitating towards computers and computing as one of my passions.
Well, if we fast forward a few years, when is the first time that you hear about Linux?
That would have been in high school. I had a friend. I went over to his house and, he pulls me over to his computer and says, "Hey, check this thing out. It's called Linux." And he was running Red Hat Linux, not Enterprise. This is pre-Enterprise days. This is just Red Hat Linux. He's like, "Yeah, check this out. It's, the system here is called X Windows and it's running on, Linux." Well, what is Linux? Tell me more. And, so he kind of showed me around a little bit. I had no idea what I was looking at, just that, the cursor wasn't like a pointer. It was a X, like it was crosshairs on the screen and
Yep.
everything was a little different and it was just weird. I was immediately like, okay, I want to know more about this. This is cool, you know. So I went out and I got a magazine. I don't even remember which publication it was, but I remember it had Mandrake Linux bundled in. And I ended up figuring out how to dual boot. I think I was like 14 or 15 at the time, and figured out how to dual boot with Windows and, repartition the hard drive and everything else. Um, and I remember my dad getting mad at me because I had set Linux as the number one boot option. And so I had to figure out how to flip it so that Windows would be the default. But then I could go into Linux. But yeah, that was 90s, late 90s, something like that.
Did you have any near mishaps with the computer, with like destroying Windows or something?
Oh, I'm sure I probably did. I don't remember them now, but I mean, we had always self built our computers and stuff too. So I mean, we had like hard drive meltdowns and random things where we'd mess something up, like a jumper pin on the hard drive, and lost all our data. Like that wasn't super abnormal for our household to have something just suddenly not work. Um, so I don't remember any specific instances, that's for sure.
Well, that's a good thing because they tend to stand out, but in your situation, probably didn't stand out. So being in that type of environment, you didn't have any reservations of jumping right into Linux because I mean that's something that you were used to.
Right. Now, this was still fledgling days, so, there was only so much I could do with it. Like, getting the modem working was, you know, like, filled me with a sense of pride. Old 56K days. Oh, wow, I got a dial tone. This is amazing.
Yep.
Um, after spending 5 hours sitting there hacking at the, config files, trying to get it to load the thing and rebuilding the wrapper for it. And yeah, it was a different time.
Well, that was a different experience that we have today. You mentioned the modem being a headache, and you said it was Mandrake. But what were the things that were exciting about that first experience with Linux?
Well, it was different, like I had um, come from the Commodore 64, and then I learned, Apple IIe was what we had in school. So that's what I learned to type on. And, the first thing I played Oregon Trail on and all of that. Um, and then, there was DOS, and, I used DOS a lot. And then there was Windows 3.1, and that was different and interesting and life-changing. And then there was this Linux thing, that I was discovering, I think, feels like it was around the same time as Windows XP. And it just, you could do cool stuff with the operating system. Like with Windows, you could do cool stuff with the programs that you could put on the operating system. But with Linux, I could make the whole operating system different. I could, eventually, like when I got a little deeper into it, try KDE 3 instead of GNOME 2 and
Yep.
trade stuff out. And that was fun for me, and I know a lot of us Linux people, like that's something we derive joy out of, but that's not the way it is for most people in the world. They're like, you're spending 3 hours, messing with color schemes and moving the bars around to, various parts of the screen. Why don't you just do something like play a game but this is fun.
Yep.
Like I'm enjoying this. So
I had a similar experience when I started, because I started in the KDE 3.5 days, and that was just like a dream come true to be able to change pretty much everything and anything. So yes, I totally agree. Now, you said you did dual boot Windows back then. For you personally, how long did it take you to make that jump full time to Linux?
Well, I'll caveat that a little bit. I kept a dual boot around for a long time, until honestly just a couple of years ago. And I was spending 90% of my time in Linux starting around the mid 2000s. I was in college and I decided, what, I'm at a point where I can do this. I wasn't having to ship Word documents to my professors. We weren't quite there yet. As a society, we weren't emailing our papers in just yet. I was still turning them in by hand, so I could use things like OpenOffice and the various Office, like I think it was AbiWord for a good long while. And it didn't matter so long as I had the font and I had the font size right and it printed correctly. Thank God my printer worked. And so, yeah, I decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm doing it. Like I'm going to be on Linux as much as I possibly can. And I really could, even back then, I could be for most of what I did. And, granted, I was fixing a lot of stuff myself. I didn't have like a support system that I could really reach out to except for forums. And oddly enough, this was the time when I was going to the dog park a lot, and there ended up being like 4 other guys who were all Linux geeks that were at the dog park that I just ran into. And they became kind of my lug for a while in college, where, I would show up and, oh, hey, I don't even remember their names anymore, but, dogs would be off playing together and be like, yeah, you tried out this Ubuntu thing yet? Oh, yeah, I just downloaded the ISO. Pretty cool. Like, it was weird, but, it was fun.
It was weird, but they were probably going through the same things you were going through. So
yeah, exactly.
So I know that you're a distro hopper because you are.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So what is it about distro hopping that we love to do it so much?
Well, there's a couple of things. Part of it to me is seeing what's done well in different corners. And part of it is seeing what's done, I don't want to say not so well, but maybe in a bizarre way. Like, I'll give you an example. Pardus Linux, which is all about cats. It's KDE with cats. And honestly, it's great. Like, the distro works really well, and there are cats everywhere. I'm not a huge cat person, but I can appreciate that somebody really just wanted to modify Linux to where it was all about their feline friends. And it's just irreverent and fun. And somebody is enjoying themselves creating this project, probably just for themselves more than anything. And there's a joy in that, right? Like,
Yep.
that's somebody who's tinkering around in their garage, who, bless them, they are just having the time of their life creating something that who knows if anybody else will get it, care about it, use it. Doesn't matter. It's all about the fun of creating it. And I love finding those little tidbits. I love finding these little niche distros that maybe they're not super polished. Maybe it's just a project that somebody is using to learn how to code and, further themselves in computer science. So what? Like, that just shows me the ingenuity of the people in our community and how many people will say, you know what, I'm going to make it mine. I'm going to do things the way I want to. And a lot of times, the bigger distros will pick up little features from these little tiny distros and start integrating them. When you find something great, you can't help but want to put it in your own project. And I just really love seeing that.
Well, it takes what I started and what it sounds like you started in Linux for, which was customizing it to the way we wanted it. And it takes it to another level. And that to me is like, that is where the passion lies. That is awesome to see somebody take that passion and move it a step forward and say, not only am I going to make the desktop look the way I want it, I'm going to make a whole distro the way I want it. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give us some of your favorite distros that you've tried?
Sure. The one that I keep coming back to is Regolith. I think they have done a fantastic job at making i3 accessible and easy to install and easy to work with because it's got all of the GNOME services in the background working for you so that you don't have to set up your own scripts to like connect to Wi-Fi, set up Bluetooth, any of that kind of thing. And the creator is a phenomenally nice guy. Hi, Ken, if you're out there listening. He
He is.
he's very receptive to things on GitHub. I've sent up some suggestions and some issues and things, and he's always been really, really receptive to them. And that's something that I really like to see. I also really enjoyed my time with Solus. I think the Budgie desktop is really slick. They're doing a great job there. Uh, and their team, just the same, they are super friendly and they're really funny on Twitter. They're really good with GIFs. Really good. And I love to see that kind of community engagement. Like that's almost, even if a distro isn't something that I would personally use, if the team is entertaining and amicable and just all around, nice to talk to, that's going to make me like them more.
I totally agree. It is a big part of the success of the distro and the community behind it, not just the team, but
Yeah.
the community that goes with it. If that community is a friendly place to be and a welcoming place, it makes running that distro so much better.
Yeah. 100% agree.
So you've tried every distro out there pretty much. What is your go-to on your main machine, your go-to distro and desktop environment?
Oh, these days I kind of vacillate between Ubuntu and Fedora, like so many others do. Most recently, I am on Fedora Silverblue, and I have been having a great time with it. It is not your average distro, and it has a learning curve. And really, that is something that I really love about it. It's doing interesting things and pushing things forward and doing things in security that I really appreciate, like making the whole the whole desktop an immutable image. How cool is that? Like, and then you layer on top of it, and you've got a read-only base image. That's so, and it works. Like, you've got Flatpaks, and then you've got Toolbox on top of that, where you can spin up OCI containers to put in stuff that you don't want to layer on the base image, and they're totally separate. Like, all of my audio stuff is in a container, and it just works. It connects to Jack without any problems. Like, the people who are making this, bravo. It is so cool and fun and stable and fast and, everything that I love about Fedora, but with the stuff that I'm going to love about Fedora in 3 years now.
Yep.
So,
do you see us ever getting to the point where that's refined enough to be able to be put out there for the masses?
oh yeah, it's probably not going to be most people's like home distro, but I think that businesses who do use Linux on the desktop, few and far between as they may be, but the ability to create a golden image in your IT department, test it on your hardware, and then validate it, say, hey, this is ready to go. You put it on the server, and all of the machines across the entire fleet can be configured to automatically update and stage that update so that they just have to reboot. You schedule a cron job to automatically reboot at, 4 in the morning or whatever. And you've got stable images rolling out to your entire fleet of machines automatically. I can see that being, the wave of the future as far as how corporate IT goes. Now, whether people are going to leave Windows 10 or not, I don't know. But if I were Red Hat, that's the direction I'd be going as far as trying to sell this to IT companies or, just any companies that have an IT department who have to manage, 1,500 desktops
Right.
and all the orchestration systems and everything that have to sit on top of that. They can all be simplified. So
Yep.
why not?
Well, let's get into the podcast.
Okay.
You said that you went from support to working for JB. How long have you been listening to JB in total?
Including the time that I've been working with JB, about 2 years. When I came on with Jupiter Broadcasting, my job was to edit podcasts, and hosting wasn't really a part of it. But I came in and, I'm contributing in the Slack channels and everything, and throwing articles at this channel or that channel, or like, hey, look at this project or this little neat bash script that I wrote. And so yeah, it's just kind of a natural fit for me because I'd be doing it anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
You're also an alternating host on Linux News Headlines. And this is a very short podcast. I think it's under 3 minutes.
Yep.
But you guys pack so much info into one show. And I love that. Like it's like a big package with a small amount of time invested in it for the listener. But there's a huge amount of time invested in it on your side. Can you tell us about how much work goes into each episode?
Oh yeah, 5 days a week. I mean, it is nonstop. It's not something that we can plan for a day ahead of time either. We have somebody who pulls the news stories and does a lot of the back end research, who's part of our team. And he will have a doc ready for us, a couple hours before it's time to record. And we'll keep an eye on the news, see if anything breaks that's, better than what we have already. If there is, then we'll swap it in. But once we hit that cutoff point, we record. And then the recording, either I've done it and it's sitting in front of me, or it gets shipped to me and I edit it. Usually, you've got a 3-minute episode, but everything's got to be of the highest quality, the highest standards here. So I take my time with it, and a lot of times there are alternate reads, and sometimes there's pauses for, cars going by or a plane is overhead or something along those lines. So I will take all of the content. Usually I get about 7 to 10 minutes of raw audio, and I will cut it together so it's seamless and so that the cadence is, nice and tight and things aren't running over each other and we're within that 3 minute time frame. And sometimes if we're running over because there's too much news, I have to make some cuts. So I do it where it's needed but won't kill the content.
Yep.
And then we listen to it as a team and make sure everything is accurate. That's, one of the number one priorities is accuracy and making sure things are spelled correctly, making sure things are said correctly, that we haven't just completely butchered names or said something that is not true. Right? Because that's really, really important, especially with a show like this where everything is so concise and it's news. This is news about the community. This isn't opinion. This is fact. So It should be factual. And sometimes, we have a slip, like somebody misreads a word. It happens, So we got to re-record in, and I splice that in, and we ship a new version up to the team. Once we all get at least 3 people have listened to it and given a thumbs up on it, myself included, so that's me and 2 others, right? And usually it's our copywriter. Sometimes it's Chris, sometimes it's Wes. It just depends who's around, right? Who's not busy at the moment. And once we are happy with it, it goes off to publishing. Usually the whole process, really start to finish, it's like 4 hours, but we're not constantly working on it that 4 hours. A lot of it is sitting and waiting and just keeping an eye on the news. And, occasionally touching up the doc because the person who writes it for us is British. And sometimes we need to Americanize some bits because we're American speakers.
Right.
And it just doesn't always sound correct coming out of our mouths.
No, you got to have that accent.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, being involved with so much at Jupiter Broadcasting and doing so many different podcasts and productions, do you have any special memories of things that stand out for you that were, just special in your heart doing all of these shows?
Oh, sure. Some of the Linux Unplugged panel discussions were kind of highlights for me. The Friday stream, long may it rest, was, that show was spinning up right as I came on. That was one of the first shows I took on and took over as editor. And, I feel like I had a lot of leeway in crafting kind of how it came out and how it sounded. And it never really found its audience, but we enjoyed doing it. And in a lot of ways, that made it worth it in the long run to have done it.
Well, obviously, they know you, so they know they can trust you with that caliber stuff.
Yeah,
so
I appreciate that.
So, what is your daily workflow like? As far as, are you keyboard driven? Are you into different workspaces? Does it just come down to having a certain set of software installed on your computer?
Yeah, it's I use Reaper for all of my editing. It's proprietary, but it is working on Linux. It's quote experimental, but it's been very stable in my uses. There are a couple of bugs here and there, but nothing that's a showstopper. And, I would love to use something like Ardor for it, but it's unfortunately just not fast enough for podcast editing. The editor is geared in Ardor more towards live multi-tracking, and it is phenomenal at live multi-tracking. But trying to do shows like we have, it would take me twice as long to edit in Ardor as it does for me to edit in Reaper. So that's my big thing. I've got all of my presets and everything saved. If I decide, oh, you know what, I'm going back to Ubuntu this weekend, I can be back up and running in 5 minutes. Yeah, it's keyboard and mouse. Although I use a trackball.
Really?
Yes, I was having some issues with RSI, and I decided I didn't want to keep having those issues. So I caught them early. I bought a Kensington Slim Blade trackball. It's one of the big ones with the giant ball right in the middle. And it's been great. My RSI has all but disappeared. So mission accomplished there.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's nice and accurate, and I can even play video games with it, like even first-person shooters and stuff.
I can't imagine that.
It was weird getting used to it, but yeah, no, now I'm almost as good as I was with a mouse. Not quite as good, but almost as good.
Well, I haven't used a trackball in years. I did at one time use a trackball,
Yeah.
but I haven't used one in years. And man, I can't imagine playing FPS games with it.
If Logitech ever re-releases the Trackman Marble FX with a USB, I will be the first in line to get it. You can still find them occasionally on eBay, and they're still the old PS2 connection, and they're like $80. Actually, I think I've seen them as far up as like 120. They're kind of rare, but it's the best pointing device I've ever used in my life. My dad still has his, and he said I can have it when he's dead. He will not let go of it. But if they ever release a new one with a USB connection, sign me up.
I will let you know when I see one available. Well, you mentioned FPS games. What type of genre do you like the best, and what particular games do you like playing?
Ooh, I tend to kind of lean towards the sci-fi genres. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Destiny. That's part of the reason I have a pass-through virtualized Windows instance, is just because can't play that on Proton.
No.
But before this recording, I was actually pulling out a golden oldie. I was playing Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, which is like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. It's a little old, but it works great on Proton. In fact, it's one of the very few that's specifically listed to work on Proton. And I hadn't played it in forever. So I was like, let's pull this one out.
But some of those are the best games, dude. It's like
Oh, yeah.
Half-Life 2.
Mhm.
Like that is one of my all-time favorite games. And it's
Oh, yeah.
old now,
Mhm.
but it's still one of the best. You can pick it up today and start playing it, and it is still super fun.
Yeah, I've been eyeing Black Mesa because I haven't revisited the original Half-Life since, I think since I beat it the first time. Then Half-Life 2 came out, and that was a whole new ball game, right?
Yes.
But I've been really wanting to play the original Half-Life again. But I kind of want to do it with the new engine. Like, I want to see it with the new graphics and everything. So I might just have to shell out for Black Mesa and go through it that way.
It's worth
and then
it.
go
Trust
through
me.
Go through Half-Life 2 again.
Let's get into some Linux open source stuff. So Linux has some of the best conferences out there. And talk to me about any of the Linux conferences that you've been to.
So I haven't actually been to any. I was hoping to attend my first one this year. I was slated to go to Scale, and then I was slated to go to Linux Fest Northwest. Ended up opting out of Scale, and Linux Fest Northwest was canceled. And part of the reason I opted out for Scale is my wife has an autoimmune disorder. So I am very, very, very cautious right now. She's in the high risk category. And I am not traveling out of the house unless I feel it's safe right now. So,
Right.
yeah, I do hope that things kind of turn around because I want to go to a conference. I really want to go to a conference and see what all the fuss is, and maybe even participate. I've been kicking around some ideas for a talk. They haven't solidified yet, but yeah, I think I'd like to do that.
Yep. Well, the talks are excellent. Best thing about the conference is just talking to each individual person, people that you meet that you might talk to. That's the best thing about the conferences.
Yeah, the hallway track, right?
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, I've heard wonderful things. One day.
One day. So, you had mentioned Reaper before,
Yep.
and obviously that's not open source software.
No.
There are some people that are open source software enthusiasts that, they don't want to use anything other than open source, and that's perfectly fine. Me personally, I feel that you should use the best tool for the job. And for you, that is Reaper. So you fall in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. If there's an open source piece of software that can do what I need it to do and does it well and isn't going to fight me, yeah, I'll use that. But where there are clearly superior proprietary things that also work on Linux, possibly even through, compatibility layer like Wine, yeah, I might use that instead. Like, for example, I've been a Spotify subscriber for many years now. That's wholly proprietary, but, I'm able to share the music with my wife and with my parents. They're on my family plan. I'm paying for their subscription. Like, it's a service that does what I want it to do. And even though it's proprietary and maybe not necessarily great for the artists in terms of residuals, it's still an important part of my life. And I wish that there were open source things that were maybe in the same realm, could take the place of something like that. But in a lot of cases, there just aren't. And like with Reaper, Reaper is such a professional grade editor that is so flexible and does what I need it to do and allows me to do my work at or near the pinnacle of my abilities, that it's kind of a no-brainer. I'm going to use that. And there are some restoration things that I have to use on occasion when I have really dirty audio, and they're Windows only. Audacity does a great job, but there are some things that are a little bit beyond its level, if I'm being honest. And sometimes I have to go outside of that ecosystem to get where I need to be. And that's the pragmatist in me. I am all for open source. I believe in it very strongly, but I don't think that it solves all problems today.
I totally agree. And for an example, for me, I love the open source software video editors that are out there. Kdenlive, Shotcut, and down the list. But I use DaVinci Resolve because it is hands down superior to anything in the open source arena. And it's because of that flexibility that allows me to edit faster, to edit better. And it's the best tool for the job for me. And yeah, totally agree.
Sure. I used to have to do some video things on occasion. It wasn't very often, but every now and then I was doing some video things in my early days with Jupiter, and haven't had to do them recently, but I was using Lightworks, which similar kind of thing. Like, I did a few things in Kdenlive, but there were some rough edges that were blocking my progress, and switching to Lightworks solved that issue. DaVinci Resolve was a little too much for me, for what I needed to do. It was a little over my skill level as far as video is concerned, but yeah, I do understand that it is a world-class professional level. They use it in Hollywood style.
Yep.
Video editor, and it makes sense.
Yep. Well, Drew, I started using Linux because of reasons like customization and flexibility, and I think you did as well. That there are many different reasons why people run Linux. And for me, that was that. That was it. That was the customization, and I could do anything with it. Over the years, I have just fell in love with the community itself because of how great it is. And that's what I think the best reason to run Linux is now. What drives your passion and your love for Linux?
I've been doing it so long now, like 20 odd years, that it's almost hard to put a bullet point on it. Like it feels like it's part of my DNA now. I don't know how to be any other way. Like it just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, push comes to shove. I think it's that my brain is wired this way now. And I understand things about computer science better because of my interactions with Linux. And in a lot of ways, I feel like being close to Linux and using it on a daily basis and being in the community has shaped a lot of who I am today. So, in a weird kind of way, it's a formative thing for me. And even if for some reason somehow the kernel went away tomorrow, I would still have that warm glow as I, begrudgingly used BSD.
I love it. Well, I'm looking at it and, I used to use Windows as an operating system. Nowadays, I still have a dual boot on a different drive for certain games that don't play on Linux. But I use it as a tool now. Right. I use it I boot into it, I play a game, and I boot out of it. And like you said, Linux is a part of me to the point where I don't see myself using anything else. And Windows has just become that sideline tool if I need something. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It absolutely is. And it's funny. I was in Seattle for a sprint when we were getting ready to launch self-hosted, and Alex Kretschmar happened to catch a glance of my Tux 2, my Tux tattoo, and he noticed that it was like faded and fairly old, and he's like, "How long have you had that?" And it dawned on me then that I'd had the tattoo for 13 years. Like, yeah, this really is a part of my being. It is very much at the core of who I consider myself to be.
Very nice. Well, we have in the Linux community not always had the best reputation, dude. Mm-hmm. We have had a reputation in the past of not being real nice to people that are coming in from not knowing anything, and it's getting better every year. It's getting better. What has been your experience with the community and the community in general? Basically, has it been a good experience, and what can we do to make it better?
Well, as you've said, it's on that trajectory now, anyways. It's getting better all the time. I have had mixed interactions. Yeah, part of the reason why I stopped using Arch Linux was because of the famously toxic culture that permeates some of their hangout spaces. And I understand that that's gotten a lot better, and I do applaud them. But there were a great many years when it was hard to be an Arch Linux user if you wanted to interact with other Arch Linux users. I'm probably going to catch flack for that, but quite frankly, that was true for a long time. And, you don't get the same kind of feeling in a lot of other communities around Linux. And I'm not sure why that is, where certain corners are so different from certain other corners. Like, one community can be vitriolic, whereas another one can welcome everyone with open arms. It truly is a bizarre thing, but I do think that it is on the upswing. And I think a large part of that is because of the expansion that we've been seeing with open source in general, not just with Linux, but open source through GitHub and GitLab, and more interaction between developers, as well as Linux seeing more dominance in the server market and pulling in people who are not necessarily, Linux users, but sysadmins and, dev admins and DevOps and all of these various types of people who aren't just garage tinkerers like a lot of us who started out with Linux, 15, 20 years ago. It's a different philosophy, right? We're trying to make this work, not just hit an ideal of this is what computing should be. So I do think fresh blood is part of that. But also, the greater business community has really been coming around. We're seeing a lot fewer people who spell Microsoft with a dollar sign now. And part of it is because in a lot of ways we've won, in a lot of spaces we've won, and partly because the feud is mostly over. Like at this point, I think a lot of people are starting to realize it doesn't matter if you're running Windows. It doesn't matter if you're running Mac. It doesn't matter if you're running Linux. All that matters is that you're comfortable and doing what you need to do in your own environment. Sure, it would be great if more people were running Linux, but I don't know that it's as much of a badge of honor as it used to be. And personally, I think that's a good thing. I feel like the Linux community is more in the wider computing community than it ever has been. There's more crosstalk, there's more collaboration, there's more of a feel of we're all in this together. It doesn't always work out that way, but there's more of that than there used to be for sure.
Yep. Well, your description of some communities and like the Arch community years ago was accurate. But there are good people in the Arch community,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
they have, made the community better. And, going back to what we had said before about, the people behind the distro, you got guys like Brian, who is the lead developer for Endeavor OS. And that is one of the most inviting communities out there. And that makes you want to run that distro even more because that's the way they are. So I think we really are at a good time. We really are getting better all the time. So I would like to go back to something you had said earlier about Microsoft. And a lot of times nowadays you hear Microsoft getting involved in open source, Google getting involved in open source, but there's a lot of people that have, mixed feelings about that. Is it genuine? And I think that a lot of us have come past that. But what are your feelings on these bigger companies getting involved in open source?
Well, I do think that we need to keep a watchful eye because there will always be people who are trying to take open source and do things like many of the smart TV manufacturers, like packaging BusyBox, but not contributing back. Um, I do think it was a mistake to completely overlook VMware and the issues that they had with GPL violations. But we do need to be welcoming them to contribute in the correct ways. We need to encourage that kind of behavior because it's important for growth for all of us. We need to keep moving forward and we need more people on board. We need to keep growing open source so that everything gets better. And we can't do that if we're trying to say, oh, well, Google's evil or Microsoft is evil. I don't care if they're better now. I had issues with them 5 years ago and I'll never forgive them. And that doesn't work. It's a regressive argument because we will never really gain more market share, more relevance, more anything else if we're just constantly trying to shut out everybody that had ever done anything wrong. There has to be some forgiveness and there has to be some hand-holding to bring people into the fold, farther into the fold, and show them this is the right way. Let's get you back on track and help you contribute.
Yep. Agreed. Well, you had mentioned earlier about writing a bash script and whatnot. Do you do any coding or scripting?
Not generally. I do create little tools for myself, but as far as coding, no. I can write a halfway decent bash script. I can do some fish scripting, um, JavaScript, C, all of that stuff. It's alien to me. I can recognize some of the terms. If I'm in a text editor that has syntax highlighting, I can kind of figure my way around. But no, I'm not a developer.
Well, neither am I. So there's a lot of people that feel they can't contribute to Linux, not in a meaningful way, because, just like we just said there, we're not developers. Because they're not developers, they feel they can't contribute. But everybody contributes in their own way, and you are a perfect example of contributing to Linux by creating and editing all of the audio and content that you have been involved with over the years. That's a perfect example of giving back. What would you say to those people who are searching to find some way to contribute and give back to Linux?
Well, everybody has a skill. And whether you think so or not, there's probably a way that your skill can help Linux, the open source movement, or even just your friend down the street. By showing people what Linux is and what it can do, and being an ambassador for it, you're helping Linux. By submitting bug reports and following up, if a developer says, hey, can you try this patch? And they walk you through how to apply it and ask you for your feedback to see if the problem's fixed, that's helping Linux. Being open to conversations about what is best for open source and having constructive conversations rather than shouting matches, that's contributing to Linux. Just being present in the community and counting yourself as a member is contributing to Linux. Even if you never say a word to anybody else about it, just the fact that you're there and using it and enjoying it, in my eyes, is a contribution.
Agreed. That is absolutely perfect, because your example, people are watching what you're doing regardless if you think so or not. And even just using Linux, somebody is seeing that. And yes, do it by example. Absolutely.
Even just putting a bumper sticker on your car is contributing to Linux.
Yep.
I mean, it's not, it doesn't have to be something that's incredibly difficult. It doesn't have to be something that's incredibly burdensome. Just be yourself and do what you can with the tools that you have and make it better.
Even just having conversations with people in Telegram groups or whatever is a contribution to the community.
Yes.
Yep. Well, I mean, I got to ask you, dude. I know that sometimes people get tired of this term, but some people believe that Linux is bad at marketing. Some people believe we shouldn't even be trying to market Linux. But I guess everybody wants to get to that year of the Linux desktop. Is that a meme at this point, or will we get there someday, maybe?
No, it's always been a meme. It's always been something fanciful, because the idea that a certain percentage of market share is suddenly going to change anything, to me, is laughable. Even if we were 50% and Mac and Windows were sharing the other 50%, I don't think it would greatly change how we live our lives day to day. People would still be coding. People would still be creating different desktop environments. We wouldn't suddenly land on, one DE to rule them all and all the rest of them go away. No, that doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. That wouldn't increase adoption. I mean, maybe it would, but it's moot because it will never happen. The beauty of Linux and open source is that people can create these crazy experiments. So you get things like BSPWM, DWM, all these random tiling window managers
Yep.
that differ by a letter. But the underlying structure is totally different. Like Awesome's written in Lua, or something else is written in Haskell. Those are always going to be around. People are always going to use those things. And sure, we have more consolidation at the top than ever before, with, Canonical and Red Hat controlling a lot of the direction that things go as far as major changes. But at the end of the day, does it matter? Does it matter how many people are using it? No, I don't think it does. It matters that I use it. It matters that you use it. It matters that your listeners use it, because it matters to us. But I don't care what my dad runs on his computer. Does it make him happy? Does it get done what he needs to get done? Can he get to the websites he needs? Can he check his email? Yes. Why would I need to change that? Why do I need more people to use what I use? I think it's hubris to say that we need to make everybody think like us.
Yep.
We don't.
Well, I think we need to, well, not we, collectively, the people that want somebody else to run the distro that they run, they need to somehow be validated by that. I don't think that validates anything. Linux' greatest strength and its greatest weakness is its choice. And that's just the way it is. What do you think about the idea of a universal distro? A distro that you would hand to people to say, this is Linux. Not to say that you would stop making other distros, but that a one distro to promote to say, this is Linux.
I honestly, I don't really see the point. I think we need to give up the idea that Linux is going to overtake something else, be it Mac OS or Windows or whatever else. I just don't see a reason for that to happen. And I don't think that it could happen, because everybody's going to point to themselves and say, my distro. And you know what? They'll all be right. Whether it's Elementary or Pop OS or Ubuntu or Fedora, they're all great distros and they all excel at what they do. And very few of them target the same audience as the others. There's an argument to be made about like Ubuntu and Pop OS, maybe, but, Elementary has a different focus. Fedora has a different focus. Ubuntu has a different focus. They're all general purpose distros, but they have different feels. Different people are going to gel with different ones, right? So to say that there's one distro to rule them all and that's what we should be pushing to the masses, I don't see why we should. I don't think that it's going to swing any people our way, really. It's just going to be another choice. And we have lots of choices. If people wanted to come to Linux, they're going to come to Linux. They do come to Linux. It may not be in droves, but that doesn't matter. Does it? Really? I mean, you can load up PowerShell now and SSH into your remote Windows or your remote Linux boxes now, right? Actually, I think you can SSH into Windows boxes now too. But the point being, a lot of the real work, the stuff that runs the internet, the stuff that runs all the websites out there, the stuff that powers your Uber Eats orders, it's running on Linux. Why do we need to capture the desktop market too? I think we should be happy with our success, keep pushing. And I think we should be very happy when new people join the Linux desktop users, cabal that we have. But I have a hard time accepting an argument that we need to be out, evangelizing and telling people, no, you're doing it wrong. We're doing it right. Come be like us.
Yep. I definitely, I love to talk to people about Linux, but the people that want to hear about Linux, I don't go to people that, I don't walk up to somebody and say, hey, you should be running Linux. I mean, that's,
right.
that wouldn't solve anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't believe in evangelizing Linux. I believe in pretty much being an example of what I'm using and saying, hey, here's what I use. If you like it, I'll show you it.
Exactly. Well, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong with if somebody is curious about Linux. Yes, help them.
Yes.
Absolutely. Then you can talk to them about it and you can say, here's what works for me. Let's find what works for you. Because that's one beautiful thing about Linux, which, as you said, its biggest weakness and its biggest strength is that we have so much choice. And you're pretty much guaranteed to find something that's going to work for somebody. Maybe it's endless. Maybe they want that super simple, dialed in approach that, they don't have to care what's living on the back end. It just does it for you. Or maybe it's somebody who wants to be a power user and tweak a whole bunch of stuff. Well, here's Ubuntu. Here's Fedora. Here's Slack. Or Slackware, excuse me. There's something for everybody out there, but there has to be a curiosity there. If we try to push people too hard, they're just going to resent us, and it's going to have the opposite effect from what we want.
Yep. Well, let me ask you, if you could change one thing about Linux, what would it be?
Most of the things that I would want changed have already been changed. Things have gotten so much better in just the last 5 years, and they got so much better in the 5 years preceding that, and the 5 years preceding that. Linux has grown by so much since I started using it that it's hard for me to point to things and say, this needs to be better. Like last year, I would have told you GNOME performance. Well, they did it.
They did it.
This year, can we pick between Snap and Flatpak maybe? Like, I don't know. I mean,
let's please. No, I mean, honestly, in that realm, I think I don't understand why both can't.
No,
they both can't live in an equal system. Like, I don't think we need to make that choice.
Yeah, I do think you're absolutely right that they can live side by side. There's no reason that we necessarily have to choose. But in a lot of ways, it kind of feels like the VHS beta wars all over again, Like, I feel like eventually one of them might win out on the desktop, but I think snaps for servers are here to stay. They work really well on Ubuntu IoT Edition, and they really shine there. And I don't see any reason for that to ever go away.
Well, thinking back, Drew, to the reasons that you started to run Linux, what are the reasons that you still choose to run Linux today?
I don't know any better.
I love it.
Like, really, what would I be doing? I mean, I think my Apple certification for ACSP, I think just went expired this year, right? Um, I've done support for Windows. So realistically, I do know, I have been trained on all three of the big three operating systems. The only one I'm really kind of missing is BSD, unless you count Mac, which I kind of do, but not really. But no, I mean, I'm comfortable on Linux. I like it. I understand it a lot better. I can make it do the things that I want it to do. And I have no reason to change because there's not something better out there for me.
Very nice. Is there anything else you want to share with people?
Well, I think I need everybody to be a little more understanding and a little more kind and conscientious of others as we're going through this whole coronavirus thing. There are a lot of people out there who are at risk, and even if you're not sick, you may be sick and you may make others sick. And I just want people to be aware of that because, at least here in the US, that's not the case. I had to go shopping just the other day and nobody was adhering to the social distancing 6-foot recommendation. I had to step into aisles and let people pass. I was the only one wearing gloves and a mask in the entire store. And I know that we keep hearing it over and over and over again. And a lot of people, it's just, oh, somebody else is going to tell me to wash my hands for 20 seconds. Well, yeah, I'm gonna. And the reason is because there are people who are high risk, and my wife is one of them. She has an autoimmune disorder, and she has a significantly higher risk of death if she catches COVID-19. So just be aware of your fellow humans and be kind and smile to people and let them know that you love them and that we're all in this together and that we can get through it. And it's not that big of a burden to just stay home for a few weeks. But beyond that, and maybe on a little bit more of a positive note, keep enjoying Linux. Keep finding things that, make it special for you. Something that is really just brightens your day about it. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be something small. It can be something like the way that a terminal displays updates. And, maybe on your distro, it has nice, pretty colors. Or maybe it doesn't on your distro. So you can do something fun, like write a little bash script that wraps your package manager update script in lolcat so you get rainbow colors across your screen when you go to update. Just don't be afraid to be irreverent sometimes and use the flexibility of the tools that we have to make your day better.
Well, Drew, I want to thank you for not just sitting down with me and having a conversation, but I want to thank you for all of the work and effort that you put into your work in audio, in Jupiter Broadcasting, and in turn into the Linux community. All of again, I'm going to say that editing audio is not a simple thing. It's not, it's not for the faint of heart. And you put a ton of effort into it. And I love all of the contributions that you have made.
Well, thank you very much. As Mr. Joe Ressington says, it's as much art as it is science to do audio editing. And that is very true. There is art to it. And I feel very proud of myself for being good at that. And I think it's important that we can be proud of the things that we do well.
Well, I'm going to get some pointers from you sometime, but thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out anytime. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.